All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Youngstown's Talk Channel. Joe Danyi, co-pilot's an MIA today. So I'm not feeling well today. So you just have me. So I don't have a whole lot prepared. I feel like over the last couple of weeks, I've been a little bit too ranty, too aggravated, too annoyed. And so I just want to sort of have a little bit different of a show today, more philosophical, more user generated. So I want to thank everybody that watches this programming. I feel like this is my passion project. It's been like this for the last 5 or 6 years, where I feel like the general public, no matter if I agree or disagree with them, they have an important role to play in public discourse. And they, honestly, I think we have civility when everybody feels like they at least have an outlet for their opinions and, their same passions. So the debate and the argument and listening to things you don't like to hear is a practice. So if I say something that is controversial with you, and you can, maybe your first thing is a defensive deal where you want to argue back at me. But if I take even like a 1% influence, where you may even contemplate it, even if silently, I think it's the humility in that, and teaching people how to be open to ideas that conflict with their current dogma is really important. I think talk radio for my entire upbringing. I used to listen to talk radio when I was 8 years old, and what I loved most about it is I loved when you had disagreements. You had people that are on two sides of an issue, and they just got to hash it out. They got to battle it, and sometimes it would go really well, and you'd have two people who would agree to disagree, but be interesting to listen to. And sometimes it would be wrestling. It would be, no holds barred, and just a fight. And both of them were integral to public discourse. So I'm going to start off the topic right off the get-go of the Epstein files and how we feel about the threat of release for the 953rd time, and whether or not you're playing this politically, where you're sitting there and you're drooling a little bit with the prospect of that information getting out, and it really is going to be congruent with all of your thoughts and feelings. And maybe it doesn't say what you want it to say, and maybe it doesn't undermine the person you want it to undermine, and maybe it doesn't destroy the people that you want it to destroy. And those are the contemplations, the hopefulness, the thirst that I see on social media about how much, or with what vigor we want the public to know about these things. So here's how it's going to go down. So you're going to have a congressional petition to release those files. Those files are going to be put through the FBI and CIA filters. They're going to redact the things that hurt current investigations or national security. And then you're going to get a trove of information that have a lot of black lines through it. Now, I'm not going to pay attention to what is released as much as the black lines. I'm fascinated with who gets the black line and why. So if you had, okay, so let's just say I had my spreadsheet and said releasing the Epstein files would let all of us voters really feel like justice will be served for the victims of these horrendous crimes. But at the same time, that we lose our government and we lose all of the pillars of a civil society. Is that a fair trade-off? Now, me, I'm an idealist. Idealist? I'm an idealist. And so I just want truth. And truth is oftentimes very messy. It causes confusion and chaos. But at least it's truthful. And I think the human species are rather adaptable. And no matter if it's bad and you got to suffer consequences, at least if it's a truthful environment, we can kind of deal with it. Versus a curated environment where there are people that are above your pay grade that are deciding that if you knew the truth, that you couldn't handle it and you would cause devastation and chaos. And since I want to save you from devastation and chaos, keeping that truth from you is the proper play. And you can justify that. There are sort of like moral justifications that if you argued that way. So if you said, hey, if we had complete governmental breakdown, you had chaos in the streets, you had total disarray in the things that keep us safe that we take for granted and we don't even realize. And now you can't go out in public because of the fallout. Is it worth the 100 or thousands of victims to finally get justice? And you got to weigh that at morally. And it's the age old, like I'm knee deep into artificial intelligence. And so watching these different artificial intelligence products weigh sort of like moral compasses and moral logic, and trying to figure out whether or not, if you put on your spreadsheet that 1 million people would die if you did A, and 100 people will die if you do B, on the transactional level, on the mathematical level, you would want less people to die rather than more. Well, what if truth as a guiding principle said that the better option was to let 1 million people die because truth would prevail, and that was just a natural consequence of being in a truthful society? Could you still pick the aggregate, the bigger group, to perish because of truth? And that's a real conversation to be had. And when it gets political, you're super interested in who's going to die. What are their categories? And if the categories we can tolerate, then maybe letting more die if they're of a certain group is better than less die because they're of another group. And so watching some of these AI products use transactional logic versus more of a moral logic. So I'll give you an example. I watched a demonstration between ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, and one other one. And they were given the classic dilemma of, you got two train tracks and there's a switch. And then the train is going to hit one of the two people. And you get to decide which group gets hit. So if you had a 90-year-old grandma that didn't really put much value into the marketplace versus 4 teenage kids, you have questions of, now you have to pick somebody to die, but you get to figure out who dies by being hit by a train. And there's a bunch of logic that you put in there. The age of the grandma, she doesn't really put much into the economy. She served her time. She's lived her life and experiences. She may have had some disease or illness already, so she was probably going to die within the next 10 years anyway, versus the teenagers who have life to be served. They have yet to put their contribution into society. And which would you allow to die? Well, the proper morality is there a way to mitigate it so nobody has to die? Why do I have to be put in this dilemma where somebody has to die? And if that's not an option, where if the rule set of the dilemma is that somebody must die, you have to do some uncomfortable things like pick the best worst option or the worst best option. And we have to this gray area talk when it comes to the Epstein files. If it were just a black and white thing, that it would be easy to say. And so if you have a person that's your FBI director or national security advisor, and they are weighing the security and risks to a population of 1 million versus the justice for 1,000, you can justify. You can hear out that argument, but who gets the win? Who decides whether or not our national security interests are greater in value than the lives of innocent people or the justice for those same innocent people? And that is a real conversation to be had, and it's not a comfortable one. And it's almost like it's more comfortable to have that conversation politically, because at least you can hide behind your tribe. And so if you're a Republican, you want all Democrats to go down. If you're a Democrat, you want all Republicans to go down. And in your mind, you're like, you've done your part for your tribe to further your interests. And that's, we're going to have a conversation a little bit later about the autism and Tylenol link, right? And we've watched this play out, and there has been proponents of this where excited about the discovery and innovations of understanding of the chemicals that we put in our body. And we have the opponents to this that kind of feel that pushing on the status quo is a dangerous prospect, and why should we even be entertaining this new information? And so I'll hear both sides out, and that's where later on today, 3:30 in this afternoon, we're going to bring an MD in, and we're going to talk a lot about that link, but more from a philosophical. It's not going to be a political discussion. It's going to be a battle and a debate of philosophies. And what's important to the public that listens to this kind of stuff is that it, opening your mind to the other perspective. One of my heroes, Albert Einstein, was a big proponent of swinging a camera angle over to another perspective and gathering data based on a perspective that's not your own. And it wasn't a biased information. This is a theoretical philosophy that looking at things in terms from a different perspective is very valuable, because you take your perspective as not the, Joe-centric position. We have to learn that. And a majority of the people in the country are not that. They are very self-interested and how's this affect me? And I'm going to criticize or contemplate things from my personal interests rather than other people's. But anyway, 330-595-1600 if you want to call the program today. I appreciate all of our listeners and watchers. This is a pet project of mine where I think that the public absolutely has a stage to let them their opinions be heard. And I think talk radio did that for a number of years for me, and I am paying that forward. I have the ability down here to set up technology to give you as the viewer and the listener the ability to just take a stand on something and allow yourself to be put into the fray, and through hammering out the discussions, we come to some kind of like consensus or conclusion. And that's really important for public discourse. So what we won't tolerate is shutting up the opinions of other people. And that doesn't mean that I have to agree or disagree with you. If you say something stupid, I'm going to call it stupid. If you say something I disagree with, that I'm going to say that I disagree with it. My job is not to make you feel good about your position. It's about to make sure that every position has a stage to set up on and make it known. And you guys are critically important in that process. And you are very much appreciated for being part of this program. Many of you join us every week, every show, and share your insights. So I invite you in. Whatever you want to talk about today, like I said, Kelin's not here to talk about our normal stuff. So it's an open mic night for any of you who might want to contribute. Again, the phone number is 330-595-1600. I do have the phone lines open. You can be a stand-in, Kelin, for the day. And also chatting to this is also encouraged. So anyway, a couple of local notes. You heard me hammer these different communities that were petitioning and creating obstacles in adding these data centers to the lot down the road from you. And it's a conversation that needs to be had. Not every community really wants any of these things coming in there. And if it affects your health or safety or just makes an annoyance in your community, I can see where you should be heard and you should be able to object to those things. Now, what I don't agree with is treating different people or businesses different than any other businesses. So if a company comes to town, let's just say John's Lemonade Stand comes to town. And if there are 20 lemonade stands that want to set up in your community, so long that they follow all the rules, get the proper permits, are compliant with regulations, pay their taxes, follow all the rules, you as a community, could you pick one that you just don't really want to come into your community and say, I object, and expect your local government and your councils to, hear your voice and make sure John's Lemonade Stand can't set up in your neighborhood. I think we're we're really a take for granted, area of the country where we are as prosperous as we are even to today because of a couple of industries. They swooped into town, they created a bunch of jobs, they added a bunch of value, they built a bunch of infrastructure, and all of us should be thankful to the industries that came before us that, made that happen. Now, we've lived on the 1920s to 1980s steel mill and, hospitals and whatever else visit us in town. And we have to kind of have a part of us that know that we have to plant the next seeds of industry, no matter what it is, whether or not it's healthcare, whether or not it's pharmaceuticals, whether or not it's data centers or solar energy production or whatever it is. Somebody's going to come around in our communities and take interest in using all of this infrastructure that the previous industries built. And it's up to us as our governors and our administrators to be able to make wise choices about who we invite to town and what we make easy and what we make hard. And if you have a bunch of 70-year-olds or 60-year-olds plus that they did their thing, right? They just kind of want to live out the rest of their existence, and they want to have as many conveniences as they can and as much prosperity as they can. And they're not ready to reinvest today into the next generation and make sure that there are jobs and opportunities ahead of the next group. They're looking out for number one. And, if you get a group of people that are in that age group, and there are a lot of them, you have to listen to their words. I mean, you don't want to on purpose tread on the people that set everything up for you. So I'm not quick to say, the boomers are responsible for every downside that we experience on a daily. But I also expect them to say, I got mine, right? And it was kind of good. And I know the previous generation made sacrifices to make that happen. And I'm willing to be inconvenienced for my grandkids and my kids to, realize exactly what I had in front of me. And so that is my appeal to our area and figuring out what it is that we're going to, if we're going to oppose anything that comes to town, energy production, labor jobs, data centers, whatever. If we're going to oppose those things, what are we waiting for? What are the jobs that we really want so that people like me can go out there and start stumping for that industry? So if I said, let's just say you really wanted a warehouse job. We got a lot of kids that want to come out of a school. They don't want to go to college, and they just want a job that pays $30 an hour to be able to palletize things and work in distribution. Fine. If that's the thing you want, we'll make sure that we sort of like orient ourselves for whoever we have, whatever opportunities or whatever resources we have at our disposal. But you just got to give me the idea of what to go out there and beat the bushes for. Because right now, I don't know that if I went out to a expo out in Las Vegas for industry, I would not even know who to court, knowing that when I bring it back home, that my fellow citizens are going to beat the shit out of it and make it so that I, regret trading some of my favors on bringing that thing to town. And I just don't know what that actually is. So if any of you listening out there can give me some insight as to something that you would not push back on. So for what I've heard of my liberal counterparts, the big voices out there in the community that have a different stripe than I do and equally as valuable. So we want density of jobs, right? We want, if you bring a company and you give tax abatements and you build infrastructure, bring me 10,000 jobs. These little 100 job outfits, they're not going to cut it for me. They're not going to add to the tax base. They're not going to create enough of what I want. And so give me 10,000 worth rather than 1,000 or 100. Make it so they're unionized, right? We're a union town. So make sure that whatever industry you bring down isn't something that can do right to work and pay low wages and, exploit the workers. And so density of jobs, make sure it's a union outfit. So give me some ideas in the things that I've already mentioned, and feel free to mention any ones that I had not yet. I'm planning on having the Sobe, a representative from Sobe Thermal, in on the program. And this is an interview that I've pursued for the last 3 years, ever since the city council put a block on that industry coming to town. I wanted to talk to them, and they've never publicly really defended themselves. They've only taken it on the chin and suffered what a community can do to a company that is not in their good graces. And I kind of want to hear from their side of the story what that experience was like, what the real side. It was really, there's not going to be a hero and villain in anything. There's going to be some things you can say about Sobe that might have been going against the interests of our community, and there was some stuff that they could bring to the community. And through negotiation, if you were honest about the debate, you would have council saying what's important to you, and Sobe saying what's important to them, and downside of council and downside of Sobe, and hammering out the details so we get the best version of whatever what ends up coming, to town. 330-595-1600 if you want to call, or just message. I hope some of our regular and normal listeners are out there, can engage. This is like I said, a big day for the Epstein files. So we'll see after it goes through the president's signature through getting to his desk and getting signed. What happens to it next after it goes through CIA, FBI, and how much of a watered down version that we get. And I agree with a lot of my liberal counterparts that this is probably going to be I would say, the most disappointing release that we've ever had, because this is the bulk of it, right? This is the bag of everything we hadn't known up to this point. The first release was like, flight logs and whatever. The meat of this deal is you have professional, influential, high value people that did things that you and I would be in deep shit if we did. And those people, for whatever reason, speculative reasons, are being insulated from justice. And that makes the governed feel like when a second tier of justice, where one set of rules and laws apply to us and then a different set applies to everyone else because of reasons, it's just a matter of time before those reasons get exploited and corrupted. And then just bad behaviors gets folded in with national security. And all of a sudden you can't send somebody to prison because of a justified national security risk. And that's our fears, is that this is going to be a disappointment. We're not going to learn anything. The people that are the fall guys are going to be not the entirety of who should fall. And that makes us severely uncomfortable. So if the list doesn't get released, we're disappointed. If the list does get released, we're disappointed. And so this has all the hallmarks of unrest when it comes to this thing. Timeline wise, you got to understand, there are people that listen to this program that were not even born when this stuff went down. And the timeline goes all the way back into the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, when this guy was investigated and people knew about what they were doing. And the first prosecution of the first investigation to this was felt as slimy and as dirty. I believe his last name was Acosta, not Jim Acosta, the other one. And Epstein was given a pretty good deal and served not a whole lot of repercussions for his actions. And if you would have had a legitimate prosecutor or someone at the helm of this, we could have dug into those investigations when people were still alive and where memories were fresh. Well, you fast forward to 20 years after this happened, and what's the likelihood of a cold case being able to give you names and functions of the people who were the perpetrators? Some of those people aren't even in government anymore. Some of those people aren't even in a position of power anymore. Some of those people are still there and are sweating bullets right now to hope that the people that they trusted to protect them we'll keep protecting them 20 years later. Because I think, you know, you get freshman senators and congressmen in there, and they don't know what would happen. They're 5 years deep into a 20-year-old issue, and all of a sudden, you know, your allies have all retired and they've left you. So how confident are you that your secrets are going to be kept and you're going to be protected from, you know, serving jail time? At the same time, the victims, what's the incentive? You know, I watch all these press conferences where politicians will surround themselves by, you know, 20 victims of the Epstein Island. So we have all of the information in the heads of people that are standing right in front of the podium talking. And the investigators would say, there's our group. They can name names. They can say what happened. They can implicate the people who need implicated. But yet, we don't see, like, just take Epstein out of the equation. If there was a murder trial, right, and we need to build a case on someone, what would be our most valuable information? All right, well, it's been 20 years, and we want justice to be served, and let's take any of the victims. Well, not of a murder case. Those would be harder to get in a deposition, but let's take people who were involved, witnesses, people who had information in their head, and get them together and collect information from them and build a case just like we would any other. The longer you wait, the harder it is to, you know, get that information, especially if those people feel threatened by even coming forward. What is the government capable of doing to a witness that might put 20 of your own in prison? How much are they threatened? How much of it is subtle threats? We're just afraid that the government's going to torture you because they have the ability and power to do it. And so what's the incentive? So this whole, you know, rolling your stories out in the public, but not a connection with the investigation or things that can actually put people in prison. I mean, would you like to see, as a viewer or a listener out there, to just go through the names, the certain ones put him on trial, the ones that are, you know, like, let's just say you had a popular politician that made 20 trips to the island, and they obviously saw the place that you're investigating. They could add some insight into who was involved and why they were there and answer some important questions. And it feels like we are purposely dropping the ball on the investigatory part of this and letting everything just be weighed in public opinion. So if somebody comes along and says XYZ person was on the flight logs, many of us would say, well, they obviously were a part of it, or at least knew what was part of it, put him in prison. Well, what if you went there on business? They brought you down there because you were signing a lease, and they wanted to have you eat some shrimp cocktail, listen to some, you know, bongo drums, and hang out with important people for the weekend. You didn't break any laws, or, you know, you didn't assault anyone while you were there. Should you be placed in that same dragnet that the public opinion is going to put you in? I mean, if my name showed up on the list and I was there, regardless of the story that I'd have to tell, I think I'd be gang tackled by public opinion and saying that I was there and I must be as guilty as the people who did the bad stuff. So that's really where I don't feel like there's a whole lot of intelligence that is governing the release of information. It's all so speculative. So even if you said that a popular Democrat or a popular Republican was part of the group, we'd instantly just place them in the same category as the people who did all of the bad stuff. And I don't believe that it was all bad. Anyway, all right, 330-595-1600. You can give me a call, or you could just reply to this wherever you're at, Facebook, YouTube, X, any of those platforms that we are broadcasting on here today. If you're just joining us, Kelin is not with me today. She's feeling a little under the weather, so you just got me to talk about the things that are important, local, national, anything that's on our melons here this morning. This is also something that I'm switching gears. I realize bad segues into the different things we're talking about. But there's some pretty important people that have dumped a lot of investments here in the last couple of weeks. And as a person that watches the market and makes predictions of things that are breakouts and things that have been oversold and things that are about the bubbles that are about to pop, I pay attention when important people make decisions, and you got to know that they have a little bit greater insight than we do. So Nvidia was one of the major names that we had a lot of stock dumpage here in the last couple of weeks. And so what does Nvidia do? Nvidia was a company that chip manufacturer. They make graphics cards. They owned the gaming industry. And when AI came onto the scene, they found out that the Nvidia chips were really good at processing the same types of information that graphics use to make, gaming and stuff appear on your screen, video editing, video renderings on the screen, right? So Nvidia played an integral role in the rollout of the compute power that was necessary for AI. And if you look at where Nvidia has been over the last, 5 or 6 years, you made a hefty penny if you were an investor in Nvidia. It's much more valuable than it was when it was a simple gaming chip manufacturer. And it doesn't look like on the horizon that AI is switching gears. So why do you think that Nvidia all of a sudden is not a great prospect for, institutional investors like Peter Thiel? What does he know that we don't know? And so you got to look at it this way. You made great returns on it. If you were an early investor, you had 5 years of exponential growth. You have an industry that is 100% leveraged to your product. So even looking on the horizon, you're like, is that industry going to buy more or less of the chips that we're manufacturing? So what does he know, or what does he know that we don't know? I don't have any great guesses other than there might be a competing technology that they're aware of, that if I'm going to slide my money into something that has a greater chances of giving me a return than the one that I'm currently in, I'm going to slide to that. So maybe we're on the precipice of a new technology. Maybe that Peter Thiel knows that something else is coming along that's going to curtail the exponential growth in Nvidia. But it is interesting. And another one is Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoin sellers over the last couple of weeks as well. And Bitcoin has always been sort of like a safe, unregulated store of wealth, right? Not really put in as an investment at this point. I was an early investor in Bitcoin, and we made a bunch of money when it was coming into its own. It's a deflationary digital currency, so it has a tendency to insulate you from some of the market forces that regular investments don't make. Let's just say you lived in Iraq when your government was falling, and you had some money. You had, $100,000, and you knew that if you kept it in an Iraqi bank, that it was going to be worth nothing. So you stow it in Bitcoin and buy up anybody willing to sell. It's a little bit of a store that you could move to another country and then bring your wealth back down to that economy and not lose everything that you made at that point. So it's usually when Bitcoin was expanding, it was because there was places in the world that were in crisis. And because it was that store of value, you kind of kept your eye on like, okay, well, who's buying all this up and why? Well, it's because there's war, there were warring nations and on every continent, and there are people that would rather take the risk of in Bitcoin than their normal banks. But now when you have sellers, is that sort of like an indication that we're entering a more peaceful time where that there aren't as many scared people that don't trust in their government, or the markets or financial systems in their home territory? Again, it's speculative, but when I drive around and I see differences, when things change, it's either going to be that somebody changed the matrix, they changed the programming in the matrix, and it's different, and here's the reason, or you just have adaptability, and people are changing their. And what's important is the people that are making those changes actually have gravities around them that change those markets just because of decisions they're making. So if I sold something, nobody would even notice. But if big institutions sold something, then you got to read into it and find out like what was the logic behind that sale. Julie says, I read the Katie Johnson court docs years ago. I believe them then, and I believe them now. There are so many sickos attached to this. I have no real expectations that justice will be done, especially this Department of Justice. And I agree with you. I've studied history and looked at different civilizations, and when they accumulate wealth and power, what primitive instincts usually are the first to be expressed and realized. And these are the types of things that happen. And fortunately, we live in an environment where information and communication can be done fast without a lot of, governing controls. In civilizations in past, you had powerful people that not only controlled what they were doing but also how it was released. So the iteration of today is that powerful people still have some controls, but they don't have the ability to blanket all control. So if you take a current president and you put them side by side by a 1800s president, well, I bet you're going to find a lot more authentic similarities in how they acted and behaved. It's the only difference is the voters didn't have the same kind of information that we have today. So we can peek in and we have insights on things that they didn't have. So how you feel about them, you didn't have the 1800s presidents that were more noble than us. They all, like I said, they were all human beings. They suffered from all of the same afflictions that we do. It's just a matter of whether or not that information ever permeated the walls of the places that they lived. And so I just knowing people throughout history, there isn't a single person that I've studied that I didn't look into and say, well, they were kind of my hero when I thought what I learned in 5th grade was all I knew about them. When I really delved into their life, they're just like us. They made the same mistakes. They had the same impulses that we did. And that's about it. Julie also says Peter Thiel is a bad dude. His tech expertise has crossed into political realms, and it's not going to be good for Americans. And I agree with that. I think, the advantage of being politically connected and how much more prosperity you can taste when you are politically connected. I mean, do you really blame them for following the industry that can put more money in your pockets than less? I don't treat a Peter Thiel any different than I do a union laborer. They're self-interested. No one's expecting them to be noble. They transactionalize and commoditize themselves to the point where they're as good as what they're getting, and they fight for their own interests. It doesn't make them any different just because one has more lever controls than the other. They're the same instincts, between the two. So you have to almost treat politicians and power brokers and, people who are financially leveraged, and you treat them the same. They're probably all bad people. Very few of them have a moral compass that are, like mine and yours. Most of them are looking out for number one, and they're going to take advantage of any opportunities that are in front of them. And you can't begrudge them from doing that. The only thing you can do as a voter is to keep power away from them so they don't have more abilities than absolutely necessary. And I think we're when it comes to like healthcare and finance, we want the big bad government to save us from things. And there's your fatal, the fatal decision. You put an industry and government as your savior, and then all the attachments to the marketplace come along with it. And all of a sudden, the people that enslave you are those same people. And we don't like it when that happens, but we granted them the power and the ability to do that. So it's kind of falls on us. Jerry said, with the aging population, I think compression socks are worth investing in. I agree. And I'm a big advocate for compression socks. I'm a runner. And as I age, I feel like the longer I run, the more blood accumulates in my lower extremities, and it gets really uncomfortable. So I keep those compression socks probably about thigh high at this point. They started off at ankle high, then they went to knee high, and now they're all the way up. I mean, I might get sort of like tights, compression tights that take it all the way up to my lower abdomen. And just to keep that blood on the upper extremities, I need that. And, when your heart gets tired and you get aged, that body just has a harder time supplying the nutrients and oxygen that all of your cells need. So me and Jerry and I will be investing wholeheartedly in innovative, cutting edge compression socks. You've heard it here first. Patricia said, did you talk about Quiet Piggy yet? I'm still not sure that's what he said. To me, it looked like he said Quiet McGee, like he thought that was her last name. All right. I would not be surprised if Trump called that ABC reporter Piggy, but I'm going to find out. It is worth finding out. Did Trump call the ABC reporter Piggy? Let's see what Grok has to say. Come on, Grok, you can do this. All right, try again. Did Trump call the ABC reporter Piggy? All right, here's what Grok has to tell us. He's reading lots of posts. Yes, on November 15th, President Trump called Bloomberg News reporter Catherine Lucy Quiet Piggy aboard Air Force One after she asked about the release of the Epstein files and whether anything in them might be incriminating. The exchange was captured on video, which circulated widely on social media. The Guardian, The Telegraph, Trump has a history of using similar insults, such as calling former Miss Universe Miss Piggy and referring to journalists as losers. The incident drew widespread criticism, with CNN's Jake Tapper calling it disgusting and completely unacceptable, and the International Women's Media Foundation noting as part of a pattern of demeaning language towards female journalists. While White House defended, I don't necessarily think it's women in general. I know you might have a sensitivity that calling a protected class like women, insulting or not, but I think he's pretty across the board with his insults. I can't think of somebody who's in opposition to him that he doesn't take a 12-year-old insult and, lob some of those from time to time. So that angle's probably inaccurate, but is he childlike when his insults? Absolutely. Do I think the media are equally as insulting? So yeah, I think they brought a lot of this on themselves by being as petty as they are, which is just, welcomes. In a perfect world, I want the president to be of a higher standard and to not take the bait, to come down to the level of the integrity of the media. But it's where we're at right now. And so if the media wants to be mean and the president is mean right back, I think the media is much more calibrated. I think they're better at being mean to Trump than Trump is being mean at them. But what resonates with the voters? If the upside is that your voting base thinks that you're hurling insults because that's exactly what they would do in that position. I mean, the genre of movies that are most popular right now is where the villain who does and says everything that we would do or say we would do is our hero. Then we kind of cast this die where we welcome it. We love it. We love when somebody punches back. And it was, if you were a fan of George W. Bush at the time and watching someone who was a little bit more honorable with how he engaged in the media and watching how petty and abusive the media was towards them, I would argue that when you took the job, you knew what the media was going to do to you. But all things equal, I think both of them are, both the media and President Trump are immature, don't take their job serious, don't really care about informing the public. It's all about the get or the social media, and I think it's below. Both of them are guilty is what I'm saying. And I'm not impressed when Trump goes into his tirades that I consider immature, but it's where we're at. They elected him, and that's what we have right now. But we kind of know it, so it's not a surprise that if you were to take a guess and say, hey, let's just say somebody came in, we'll say Vladimir Zelensky comes in. Do you expect that interaction to be a cordial, professional engagement? Or do you feel like you got jokester in chief and insulter in chief is going to take shots at Zelensky when he's there and vice versa? You can pretty much put money in the bank how it's going to go down just because we know the temperament and the personality of the guy that's leading this country. Let's see. Julie says the instinct to control the populace with technologies is what is new. We have no ability to fight it, but we did that. It's like the libertarian in me argues with people like you about controlling other people, because every iteration where we want to force other people to do something against their will, when it comes politically, you're all for that. Like, let's take a billionaire that doesn't have to pay taxes. Do you want to force that billionaire to pay taxes? It's easy to justify it when it's sort of a part of your ideology. But when you open and you break the seal and you open that door to telling other people what they have to do, this is sort of the other side of that coin. And when you welcome it on one thing, you have to know there are consequences on the other side. The Republicans did a good job about fighting the what's that thing called? I always lose this word, where when you have a representative that gets behind the podium and they read War and Peace so that they can't get cloture. What the frick is that called? But anyway, it takes a super majority in order to get cloture on something. And if you wanted to just kick something down the road, that you could pull this thing. Well, you had the ability to make that not an option when it came to the government shutdown. And the Republicans refrained from that because if the roles reversed and Democrats, got control of the House or the Senate, that was a tool in your tool belt in order to negotiate pathways to legislation. And if you removed it because it was convenient for you, you kind of have to look down the road and have to know when that's going to be played back against you. Chicken says, glad I'm not the only one wearing compression socks in this group. Yeah, I actually, I was in a meeting the other day, and one of the professionals on the other side of the table was wearing New Balance. Now, New Balance shoes come with an acknowledgement that you've entered into the aged community. And you have the cargo pants and the white socks that are pulled up all the way and the New Balance shoes, and you're mowing the grass. The grass stained New Balance is sort of like a meme on its own. But I like New Balance. I like some of the looks of these shoes, and I hear they're comfortable as can be. But every time I go to buy shoes, I'm like, should I pretend that I'm a 20-year-old basketball player? Or should I pretend that I'm a almost 50-year-old grass cutter? And I know where I want to go, but I've just not been willing to concede that I'm entering that group. No emails or mails from AARP. I'm just not ready yet to pretend I'm not an athlete. And so there will be a day where New Balance and compression socks are something that are just part of my regular routine. But right now I'm not really ready to admit that quite yet. Carter says, Piggy, how many Dems have called Trump Hitler? My point exactly. If you're going to be petty, insulting, and name calling, and then you get the same. So it'd be a 1-for-1. So I would want to say, how many petty, insulting, immature things has that reporter called Trump? And how many times has Trump called that person petty, immature, insulting things? If they're both doing the same thing, I'm not impressed with it. I would not do business that way. But that's just where we're at right now. And it's just that we should all be embarrassed on who we put in a public sphere as a representative of who we are. And is it that we want a mirror representative? So if we're all one way, we want the people that we send to important parts to be exactly the way that we are? Or do we want better representation? People who technically are people, but they behave more noble and more as gentlemen and women as we do. And that becomes the question. So you can't clutch your pearls and say Trump said a mean thing when one side has been, just as immature as him. Patricia said, but watch the clip. I will. I'll watch that a little bit later and see if I don't know what opinion will change. I'm pretty certain that he said Piggy, but I'll watch it anyway. Thank you, Patricia. Julie says he is especially liberal with insults to women journalists, on track with his person. I just think that's a sensitivity, and those ambush predators that want one of those protected classes to be insulted separately from everybody else. I think he's sort of like an equal opportunity offender. I don't necessarily think he goes after women more than men on purpose. But, you know, if you had the data and statistics that said, we delve into it. So let's just say after the last 100 insults, who were they thrown at and who were those people? And were those insults to people who were XYZ but happened to be women? Or was it that they were equal to a man and they said the same thing but was directed to a woman? So we can scientifically look through the data and find out if there are any unfair levying of insults. But again, it's embarrassing that we're having this conversation at all. Those people who are representing us should not be hurling insults at all, regardless of who they're to. And the media shouldn't be doing the same. They shouldn't take their personal opinion about how they feel about a guy. You know what they're there for? Here's the deal. They get in front of the press secretary of the president, and they have a little notebook in front of their hand, maybe a little digital voice recorder, and they ask questions because they're interested in informing the public about things that are happening. That's their goal. Their opinion about him doesn't freaking matter. So do they have the ability to pitch questions that put the president in a certain light? Yeah, and they'd take full opportunity of that. So if I ask you a question, like let's just say we're looking through, we're having a hearing. If I predicate my question, like I have a bunch of words before I ask my question, and it sets the stage. So, director of the FBI, since you're a bad person and since you associate with a bunch of bad people and you all make really bad decisions that negatively affect black people, who do you decide to prosecute and not? See what I did there? I can ask that question with an answer in mind, but when I pitch the question as a completely biased angle on the question that I'm about to ask, that's when reasonable people bow out of that. So there aren't many. And as Kelin mentioned a bunch of times, Peter Doocy, he plants his lips firmly on the administration's ass when he asks a question. He'll do the opposite of that and say, since your administration is so awesome and you're probably the best administration on the planet, let's get some information about how the next awesome thing you're going to do and why you're going to do it that way. That's equally as absurd when we're playing the game of either we're an adversary and we're taking political slant and building it into what we're asking questions wise. And if you're an ass kisser and you're asking questions just to stroke the ego of the person that you're in, the rest of us are like, hey, how about this? There's some unknowns in this. Just ask about the unknowns. So you can write that in your paper about those unknowns. Let's not try to get them. Let's try to just inform the public as what I expect from a media pool. And if Trump took ABC and lost their license and kicked everybody from the mainstream media out of there, I'm okay with that. And you fill those chairs with people who have not yet taken an aggressive angle and made everything about a gotcha statement. Somebody who's just I want a bunch of nerds in there that are just data driven. They don't even really know what's happening in the political scene. They don't care, right? They're data collectors. So they have a spreadsheet in front of them and they're taking down data and taking down information. And they turn around and write a nice, boring article about what's really happening and the answers they got to the questions they had. Anyway, that's just me. Julie said women tend to ask more pointed questions. He doesn't like that. It was a legitimate question. Let me see what question they asked. And I want to see what your definition of pointed is and see if it was a slanted or a political angle on it. So it was Catherine Lucy. And I'm going to ask Croc what question did Catherine Lucy ask? And we'll see. I want quotes. I don't want summary. Her initial question focused on the House's potential vote to release the remaining files amid speculation about Trump's ties to Epstein. as Trump responded, claiming the files would expose others like Bill Clinton and Larry Summers, but not him. Lucy followed up by asking, if there's nothing incriminating in the files, why not act or why not release them? Trump interrupted her saying, quiet, quiet, piggy. All right. I'm not going to take Catherine and say that she was out of line on that one, right? Yes, you are hungry and thirsty and drooling that if this gets released and you want to get Trump as being connected to the release. But if it were me sitting in that chair and I had the gaze of the president and can ask a question, right? I don't want to, before I know enough to what it's about, to implicate the president on unknowns and speculation, right? That's not going to be a good article for my constituents. I would say something to, what is your take on who gets released and all of the fallout from those people then being embroiled in a controversy of being part of the Epstein thing, right? No names, not picking somebody out that happens to Republican or Democrat. I'm going to say, and you can fill in your own blank. So if Trump felt like he might be on that list, and he can answer the question based on his personal opinion of his fears about being on the list. But anyway, like I said, it was populated with some, what Julie called a pointed question. But what I would say, it was pretty biased. And do you think, okay, so look at it from Trump's perspective. Is the Epstein files, is it being used as a weapon against him personally? And the people that don't like him, they suffer from the syndrome, they want him to be in that list. Are they eager to see his name being displayed somewhere? And if you took that angle at me on a regular basis, then the question you're asking is, see if I can get you in a spot where I can see that you're afraid of being on the list. Let's just say he's like, yeah, I'm petrified. If my name appears on that freaking list, like, you guys will gang tackle me and never give me a chance to explain myself. So yeah, I'm petrified. That'd be a great article, right? And that's what she was going after. What's the likelihood of him saying that? And so the dismissiveness of Trump to that reporter is equal to the pointed question that the reporter lobbed at him. Let's see. He has the ability to release the files. Simple. Why not release them? I kind of laid it out. I think the devastation that happens because of it. So I know, and when I say no, I mean, this is my opinion. There are a ton of really nerdy, geeky political people in those positions that will get in a lot of trouble when and if this comes out. And all of those people, right, were hoping that when they were there, it was private. And the release of anything, whether it be video, audio, testimony, or evidence, makes a private thing into a very public thing. There's a lot of people that are going to fall. Lots of people. I'm guessing hundreds of people. And so could you personally be afraid that you were going to be indicted because of this, and also be afraid that some unintended consequences were going to visit people if they were to be released? And which would you be more afraid of? So if you're not on the list, could you still be afraid of civilization or government falling because of what you were about to release? Could you push up against that and say, I don't want this to be released, because even though we'd put 100 people in jail for what they did wrong, we'd have disaster in all of the stuff that I'm managing about what would happen to the economy, what would happen to national security, what would happen to privacy, what would happen to legal, what would happen to religion, what would happen to everything? What's the fallout from releasing this thing, and weighing whether or not you release it and maybe you don't fall, but everything else around you falls, and there's nothing to govern because everything is smoking and on fire. And so, that's sort of like, I don't know that it's that, and I don't know it's the other thing. And so you can't assume because someone is pushing back against its release that it's because they're on the list. That's too myopic. It's really too simple to be the reason. I think it's going to be far more complicated, that even if you had like the one dude that voted against this, right? So it was almost unanimous for the release. There's one dude that said, nope, I don't want to release it. I think there was 5 abstaining and one that voted no. If I'm a reporter, I want to go up to that dude and say, why the frick did you do that? Number one, didn't matter. It had universal support. There wasn't enough people that voted no. So even if you accidentally joined the yeses, right, at least you wouldn't be outed. That makes it really suspicious of why you voted no. You know it wasn't going to carry any weight, but you did. So why did you do that? And then we dig into like the people that are opposed to the release of information. You have 4 options in my mind. Those who don't want to release it are, number one, they are part of the problem and they're afraid that they're going to go to jail. Number 2, they're afraid of the repercussions that everybody's going to suffer if it would be to get released. Number 3, there's a principle or a philosophy that gets undermined if that were to happen. What would be the other one? So the philosophy would be more like if it opens another can of worms in another department, that you fear that one more. You set a precedence in this, and then it's, it's game on for lots of information that the people don't need to see, but now we want more, and we weren't satiated by what was, actually released. But I want to hear from that guy why he voted no on it and why he thought it was important. That should be the headline right there. Pam Bondi told him he was on the list. Do I believe that? Do I believe that Pam Bondi told Trump that he was on the list? What does that mean by the list? If he was named, we already kind of know the involvement that was publicly released at this point. They had run-ins. They were part of the New York sphere. There were interactions at parties. So on the list, I got to know, I need a qualifier for what it means to be on the list. And if we're going to take everybody that was on the list and throw them into the fire, I think there's going to be a lot of innocence that gets thrown into that fire if we're just using like, hey, Joe was at a party and Epstein was there and I high-fived him and he signed my t-shirt. Does that implicate me? And really what we're after here is not to destroy Joe, but to find out if Joe was involved in something, the illicit behavior that all of us are condemning. That's the real question. So it's less meaningful to say somebody was on the list than involved in a criminal act, that was associated by that name and by that environment. Chicken says, what would happen to the world? Because it's not just us involved or us citizens, politicians, and celebrities. Yeah. And again, the messy part of government, we'll use like the Argentinian beef deal. Didn't make a whole lot of sense that our government's supporting agriculture and raising, beef suppliers here in the United States. And all of a sudden, $40 billion gets floated to unbury Argentina, right? And so we're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. And it's because our government, when it comes to dealing with other nations, they have currencies to trade. And sometimes the currencies to trade are on the positive things, where we reward people with money and opportunities and security. And sometimes it's on the negative side, where our spies find out that somebody did something, and now we can hold blackmail over one of our enemies so that they won't do the thing they're going to do because we hold that blackmail and leverage over them. And so that state of affairs is very messy, and it's not one that most of us regular citizens would be comfortable with. So let's just say, hypothetically, and I don't know this to be true, let's just say Epstein was a pervert and he assembled an entire industry about, he was in the finance world. So on a small scale, he proved that he can bring important people, let them do some things they wouldn't otherwise do, hold some blackmail on them, and get them to agree to contracts that he wouldn't otherwise had. So somebody comes in here, they want to sell me a copy machine, right? And I take them in the back room. We get liquored up a little bit. We have some conversations. They drop their guard. They say something they probably shouldn't have said. I got it on recording. Now we come out to negotiate the copier sale, and they go into their normal pitch. And I'm like, hey, listen, terms are great. I think I can get a better deal out of you. And they say, well, why is that? And I hold up my little tape recorder and I say, here's the deal. Like everything we said in the back room, I know you wouldn't want the public to be able to hear that. And I'm not going to look to expose you. I'm not going to ruin your reputation, but I want to let you know that I have this. I want you to make a pitch on that deal better than you did before, knowing that I have this. And I'm going to hold on to it. And they're like, okay, well, I've added some fear and they don't want that thing released. And so they gave me a 25% discount. I'm like, yeah, that's a better deal. So I leveraged using blackmail and information to be able to get a deal from someone that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to get. Well, after proving at small scale where you can get business deals done, what about political favors? Could I invite a senator down and say, hey, Mr. Senator, I really, my back patio over here, look at that ocean, that blue-green ocean. I've got a swimming pool there. Let's go out there and let's do a massage, because I think most of what we have to say, you're going to get a massage. You're going to feel better about it. And then we'll have the real talk after you're relaxed in it. Have a drink, maybe do a couple of things, and then we'll get to the real business at hand a little bit later. So you're laying out on the massage chair and saying, hey, I want to tell you, I got this girl that we just hired. She's smoking hot. She is a 10. Let me have her give you this massage. And the senator's like, oh, okay. I'm on a little vacation here and nobody's around. There's no cameras. Let me get this massage from this 10. And then you just get baited into doing more and more things that if the outside world was looking at you, it would never do. But then I took you to a point where I could take you. I got the recordings and the evidence that I could use against you. And now when it comes to a vote that benefits me, all I got to do is hold up that tape recorder and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to use this stuff. I don't want to tarnish your reputation, but I want to let you know that I do have it. I'd really appreciate your vote when it comes to the Senate floor. And if we could do this with business and finance and owning politicians, can we do that with, Prince of Saudi Arabia or a diplomat from Argentina? And we could just gather all of these currencies that can allow us to basically call our shots. We can call in those favors and hold that blackmail and remedy on everyone. And we could just get our way everywhere. And so it's a very valuable tool. So just to think the Mossad, CIA, FBI, law enforcement, who are like, even though this is slimy and dark, could we use this for national security interests where we can on purpose go after an enemy, get them in a compromising position, and be able to sway what they do, save millions of lives because we were controlling the Prince of Saudi Arabia. And you can see how this isn't just a bunch of pedophiles who were, impulsively just catering to an upper crust. There could be a whole lot more, strategy behind what it is that they did. So if the CIA started using the industry that Epstein built, and they've got, real reasons. I use the analogy or the example of if you had an undercover operative that infiltrated a biker gang and with the sole intention of taking the lawbreakers in the biker gang and taking them down and putting them in prison because we know what's going on, but they're insulated. We need somebody inside. Well, when you send your guy into the biker gang, how far is that biker gang guy allowed to go? If you need somebody inside and you're going to put somebody away, there's a net good that's going to come of it. But can that dude do drugs so he's believable, so he can snort some cocaine while he's with them, technically breaking the law, but at the same time still with the intent of getting the biker gang? How about fighting? Can they go can your internal operative go into a bar and punch people in the face? Illegal to assault people, but for the end of maybe in 6 months or 8 months from now, you'll be able to put somebody in prison that will save lives. What about murder? Doing a drive-by and killing somebody, opponent. Can you still justify the bad behavior of the biker guy that's an informant that shoots somebody from a rival biker gang committing murder for the end of getting someone put in prison because of the laws that they're breaking? What's our tolerance? And as long as we don't know about it, we're probably pretty okay with it. If the CIA does things for the greater good by breaking laws that you and I can't break, then what stops them from doing an Epstein Island same type of scenario? We allow them to do things that are illegal for the sake of doing a greater good somewhere else in the economy. In a perfect world, you don't need to do that. But in the slimy world of the industry of politics, that stuff probably happens every single day. And I don't think the Epstein files are any different than what I just described. Inside job, really bad people that sort of collaborated with law enforcement and national security agencies to be able to get their guy or influence on the international stage. And I think that's in the whole, everything we'd really want to know is going to be behind the curtain of this poses a national security risk because of how the operation, rolled out. And if they would say that, if Kash Patel would come out and say, here's the deal. Everything that went on, everything you think would happen, or thought was happening, did happen. But the reason it was happening is because this was an undercover operation to be able to feed our national security interests. I can't tell you anymore. That's just what it was. And just one of the ingredients of running a influential country in the world. Sorry about that. Whatever. At least I'd know, right? Now they filled in the blanks, but they can't say that. They can't say the other thing. They're going to release just enough information to keep us occupied by another 6 months. And we're never going to know actually what happened because it's above our pay grade. Unless you've got security clearances, you'll never know what Epstein did or who was part of it or the justice that needs to be served for the victims. It's going to be this circumstantial things that we levy as political weaponry against our other people. And that's what we're in for the next year. I will guarantee you, we will never know truthful. We'll never know. So sorry about that, but that's just the rule of the road at this point. Do you think Epstein offed himself? I do not. I do not think he offed himself. I think there were lots of reasons why he needed to not be on this planet anymore. And as part of the agreement, maybe he did off himself as part of the agreement. And knowing that if he got all the benefits of being part of this, that he had a cyanide pill in his pocket. And he knows that rather than be compromised and destroy all of those other lives, he needed to take the pill. And when the spy gets in that position, they know their duty as being part of it, that they got to take the pill. So I'll go as far as saying, do I think it was Epstein's choice to off himself? I do not. Do I think that he was put in the position that now it was required that he off himself? Higher likelihood. And do I think that somebody else just did it for him and it was pitched as a suicide? That is the highest likely. So in the order, I really think that somebody else did it. It's possible that he did it as an obligation to what he was a part of. And do I think that it was just I'm sad, I'm going to off myself? I do not think that is one of the options. So again, Joe's personal feelings. I'm just using logic and the same information that everybody else has. That's the most likely outcome as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I don't ever see, a definitive result that comes out of any of these investigations. It's too high protected. It unglues too many other things, and it's not worth the risk. Even if politicians have to fall in protection to keep this stuff outside of our gaze, I think that's what will end up happening. So thank you for that, Julie. And I'll check the phone line, see if anybody's calling. 330-595-1600. Welcome to Wednesday's Youngstown's Talk channel. Thank you for everybody who is listening and watching. You guys are awesome. Our supporters, our listeners, the people who contribute to the show are the absolute best. I mean, you're all reasonable, great arguments to have. And I appreciate you very much. You're very important to this show's, potential, and inviting many more thousands of you to get on the deal. Have you guys listened to talk radio lately? I'm still quite a bit of a talk radio fan. I don't dig the national stuff, but any local that I can get, I really think that it is still very entertaining, but it's so recycled. And even when I talk about this kind of stuff, I feel like I've already said this stuff, and maybe I'm saying it for a new audience when I do, but it seems like yesterday's show is a rehash of the day before's, and the same thing with the day before. Now, thankfully, our hosts here we talk about things in pop culture and local politics as well. But if you think of talking about national politics and taking the most things that people are wondering and what's trending, how many times in a row can you talk about the same thing? Trump's mean, people hate Trump, Trump's a felon, the Epstein files, Israel, and all. Before you're like, well, wait a minute. Didn't we already kind of like get to the bottom of this with everything that had to be said before the next caller that calls in is going to say the exact same thing that the previous one did? And it's just going to be a matter of, I hate that guy and I want to say the worst thing that I think about him, rather than people kind of exploring, getting curious, and maybe other callers can add some resolution to my thinking. And I want to be a more clear thinker, so I'm open to that. Let's see. Michael says you have a hell of a platform, Joe. Well, thank you. And that is by design. And I think, the bigger this stage and the more people are on it, the better. And again, Idealistic Joe believes in people more than he probably should. And that's why I will invite lots of people, not less, more conversations, not less. So thank you, Mike, for pointing that out. Jerry says, I listen to morning on the way to work, but don't like it as national. I do like to listen to Verb on the drive home. And I do too. Verb is an amazing, pillar. I'm not going to pillar, a gem of this community. The dude is funny as hell. He is very smart. He is well-researched. He is very connected. So when he talks about a topic, the things he references isn't just opinion. He brings some real data to the platform. And a lot of the support cast on his show are also very well read and experienced in what he talks about. So you do get a lot of insight. Even if you don't like the insight, it's still information that you didn't have. And I think that's very valuable to bring someone in that adds more dynamics to your to what you believe. Patricia says, even if Epstein was alive today, who's to say he'd tell the truth anyway? And I read the Ghislaine Maxwell deposition papers. And just recently, before she was moved down to a Texas minimum security prison, she was questioned on a lot of things. And I always look to those kind of things like I would if I was watching a court show or a court movie, right? And the push and pull, what you're listening to is probably the truth. When you're doing a deposition, you're expecting everybody to be telling the whole truth. But when I was looking at Ghislaine and I was listening to the story, I'm thinking, how much of what I'm hearing right now is because of the deal that I cut with somebody? Like, I want to go to a minimum security prison. Get me out of the maximum security. What I'm actually do, I'm going to say things. I'm willing to say whatever it takes to get the benefit of what I agreed to. So you have to lie and make it up. What are you going to do? Put me in jail? I'm already in jail. I'm in prison for 20 years. So do you think it's going to get worse for me or better? I don't expect ever to get out of this place. And so, like, they got nothing to lose. So she could have said anything. So I had to read between the lines. So at everything she was talking about, how much of it was, being an opportunist to get the deal, and how much of it was data that I didn't know before. And she talked about early on when she was involved in it, her job was to go out to massage parlors and strip clubs and recruit talent to be able to, that would be paid to come down to the island and give massages to important people and some celebrities, some important politicians, and whatever. And so you watch this in your mind, like, how likely is that? You got a person that makes a lot of money in Jeffrey Epstein, and you've got a poorer. Ghislaine didn't make a whole lot of money in the beginning. She was a $35,000, $38,000 paid employee that was managing the affairs of Jeffrey. And so if she's the right hand of Jeffrey and saying, go do this, go do that, she was filling her role as was a consigliere? Is that what the mafia term would be? Go out and get some of the dirty work done for me. So who she brought back, how much of those conversations were, hey, Ghislaine, when you're recruiting some of these people, just don't pick people that are willing. I want to go for this certain recipe of people with let's see if we can go on the younger side of things. So if it was Jeffrey who suggested that people that weren't of age were going to be the people that were going to give the massage, Then you're like, well, Jeffrey obviously, is a creep. He's a pervert. Versus if it were Jelaine saying something like, well, I know my boss really likes girls on the younger side. Let me push the limits because I want to make him happier. So she was also the perv and the creep when it came to delivering those people to that island. So regardless, both of those people were terrible people that preyed upon other people, right? So if I was having a cocktail party and I wanted all of my servers to be, busty 10s. And so I went out and grabbed people that were physically and aesthetically appealing for my guests, and they served food and everybody's happy. I didn't break any real laws. I just added to the menu. And let's just say that was effective, but I can even go better. And maybe I can start adding massages into what's acceptable at one of my parties. And then you can see how you can stack this and make it add to the impulses or the hungers of the people who are coming to your parties. And you can see it can get out of hand pretty quick, but it doesn't change the fact that they were, they were, when you start doing this behavior, somebody should notice. And if you're in an environment where nobody notices paying attention, or you can be invisible to the radar to be able to protect people from, pervasions of somebody else, that's where we kind of get off script and like, okay, well, how many Epstein Islands exist right freaking now? John Smith is out there right now with an island doing the exact same shit to get business advantage or financial advantage or political advantage. And we don't have a task force that looks in to where powerful people go. And so I'm not convinced that this kind of stuff isn't happening right now. We were talking last week about a slush fund that is available to people in the House and Senate to settle sexual harassment cases, right? So there's just taxpayer money sitting in a box that if somebody says, hey, you know what, one of your representatives were out at a bar and they did the Urban Meyer thing where they got a little too handsy with me and they're a representative. And so somebody files a claim against one of your representatives and then they're like, well, this is bad optics. This is bad PR. We can't have our representatives under that light. Let's go back to the box. We're going to pull out $500,000. We're going to walk up to this lady and listen. Like, we don't have time for a hearing. We don't want this to get in the public view. We want to save face for whoever did it. Here's $500,000. Sign this paper, right? And let's never talk about this again. And so two things happen. Naturally occurring things get silenced, and we don't know that whoever John Smith was, bad behavior should never set foot in the halls of Congress. And you also create a honey trap. You have people now that know that thing exists, see John Smith at the bar, do a couple of things, rub up against, get some pictures taken, and then be like, hey, I want some of that money too. And now you set up the circumstance where that happens, and we can't tell the difference between someone who was set up and being leveraged and someone who's just a perv pedophile that was doing something that was off the reservation. It gets very murky on who to condemn and who not to condemn when those things exist in our normal, the normal apparatus of our government. Let's see. Julie says, this show is important. You bring many perspectives to every topic. I appreciate your willingness to listen to every opinion. And that's exactly how I feel. And I wish there were more of people like us that didn't listen to these shows and want to respond only to own somebody else. And that's why I feel like the relationship between the executive branch and the media, they're not looking to add new information for the benefit of us. They're just looking, they probably have an envelope of things that they want to say. And they're just waiting for somebody to walk into something that's close enough to proximity of the thing that we want to say. And we just lob the grenade at them when it's time. And so this is ambush politics, ambush media. And it serves no value except for gives red meat to the people that hate Trump, the people that hate XYZ. And I don't think any of those people who just want that red meat should be anywhere near politics. They're not intelligent enough to participate in the dialogue. I think the people that are too stupid to talk should really just be listeners, be observers for a really long time to see what it is. And the rest of us set a really good example. And so when they merge into the debate, They know what's acceptable, what is the decorum is, what is noble, what's good intentions, what the purpose of talking. But so long that everybody puts up the worst of us, then the people merging in are going to say, oh, all they do is they punch each other in the face. And that must be what the acceptable level of discourse is. And let's do that. And now the whole thing gets blown up. And now we have to distance ourselves from regular discourse and set new rules that govern how we talk to one another. Anyway, it's sad, but I think, yes, we're the beginning of that. And I hope the next generation picks up where we left off and it doesn't become an apparatus for the propaganda, but truly, a stage for all opinions, any kind, any type. We'll talk about whatever's on your mind. So thank you, Julie, for that. How do I feel about the $500,000 senator voted to pay themselves for being investigated? That's interesting because I'm probably a bigger opponent to this than you would guess. So those of you who don't know this news story, through the corrupted Department of Justice, they were secretly and silently investigating members of Congress, right? And I believe this was under the Jack Smith. Maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe not. But anyway, they got some phones to be tapped of sitting senators, right? And so in this last continuing resolution, gave the ability for a litigious response to that. So those senators could then sue the Department of Justice for having done that to their phones without probable cause. I don't know if they had a warrant. I really don't know all of the details of it but whether or not it was definitely overstepping the bounds of what the Department of Justice is allowed to do when they get somebody in the crosshairs from Congress. And they gave them the ability to sue. So play this out. So if the Department of Justice does a misstep, whoever the victim of their misstep can sue the taxpayer for that misstep. Why would the taxpayer be on the hook? Shouldn't the penalty be against the person that did the misstep? I would much rather say, slide this in. If the Department of Justice or the executive branch or the legislative branch or the judicial branch oversteps its bound, somebody goes to prison for minimum 6 months in prison. That way, the person that broke the rule pays the consequence instead of a senator being able to sue for $500,000, which they get more money, and the person that broke the rule doesn't get anything. It's us. We pay the consequence. I didn't break any freaking rules. I didn't give you the ability to do that. So yeah, it is misguided. That is so dumb. And maybe it's meant to hold like an accountability and saying that, if you break the rules, we're going to get you with a punitive $500,000. So maybe Jack Smith pays the $500,000. That'd be fine. Whoever broke the rules pays the financial burden of it. And maybe that makes the next Department of Justice question it and say, well, I don't want to get fined $500,000. I'm going to follow the rules because I don't want the punishment that comes along with it. So anyway, it is a different story. And I think Trump even mentioned this a while ago where he was targeted. He got to sue and he was like, well, I'm going to do this lawsuit, but what am I going to do? I'm the person that's in charge of this department now. I'm going to sue myself. So I'm going to get money out of it, but who ends up paying for it? There's no consequences for the person who broke the rule because they're not even here. It's just the taxpayers literally just get to give more money to Trump, which nobody learned anything from that. That's not a cautionary tale. That's just another enrichment program where dumb things get floated by people who literally don't need any more money. So yeah, but the Tom Homan thing keeps coming up. And it's another one of those unicorns where the liberals thought that Tom Homan had some kind of duplicitous payoff. And the Republicans say, and Tom Homan himself said it was a consultation fee that was paid in cash. And I sit back and think, okay, never once as paid by a consultant have I ever taken a brief case of cash. That seems extremely strange. And I have lots of questions about why you chose your payment options to be in clamshells, in a briefcase full of $50,000 in cash versus someone paying as an expense a check that I deposit. That seems the most likely one. So yes, I still have questions about Tom Homan, and I don't know that that one is ever given any definitive answers as well. All right, so last call for any questions or something you want to talk about. I'm tired. I have lots to do today, so I'm going to break free unless somebody has. Oh, Jerry has another one, so thank you, Jerry. Jerry says, Joe, what's your thought on Hillary and Bill refusing to testify before Congress and Obama now saying he's going to fall off the radar all of a sudden? I think all three of those that you mentioned are an extremely protected class of politicians. If you saw a lot of things that should apply to all of them that never did, knows that they've got a lot of people willing to take the fall on their behalf. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised at all that they would have taken that position. All upside. Do you really think the people who think Clinton, Bill, and Clinton and Obama are bowing out because they're guilty, all of a sudden are going to relinquish support from those people? So 0% chance of downside. If they testify, you don't think they're going to be browbeaten by everything political? All downside, no upside. So I would plead the fifth too, because there's nothing to gain for those people to be part of the investigation. Now, if they force it, which they probably will, that's a different story. But yeah, like I said, all downside, no upside for any of those. And whether or not I think Obama has a little bit more than the he has a lot of skeletons in the closet. And yes, he has a lot of protections on him. But if anybody in that group of indictments, everything from what's that weird looking dude? I forget his name. But anyway, a lot of indictments, a lot of threat of indictments. I think he's eventually going to be on one of those lists. And because I think he's more protected than any indictment will be able to dislodge. So I don't look at that Obama's ever going to go to jail or be fined or whatever. But I do think that he's going to be circulated in those people that they go after. Another thing that's pissing me off, 500 tons of food that taxpayers paid for was incinerated instead of distributed to starving kids. I agree. I had a good conversation at my conference table the other day that when DOJ was doing their cuts in this USAID program, that there was a lot of aid that was intended, part of the legitimate side of the program, that now didn't have any logistics to have that food delivered, which is a sin. And it's only the next step of who do you blame, right? So if in your own household, how would you make this decision? So if you had a poisonous tree that had 3 good fruits, and knowing that if you had to take out the poisonous tree, you would lose the good fruits, would you be willing to take out the poisonous tree or tolerate the poisonous tree and justifying the hurt that would be felt when you take out the legitimate fruits? So I blame the people who corrupted the systems. I don't blame the people who are fixing the corrupted system, although I think you have some controls in mitigating the downside risk for the fixing. So, if I'm doing something destructive and I know that destruction is going to cause collateral damage, that I can build in the safety net of the collateral damage. Maybe it's not what you were getting. Maybe it's not the worst thing imaginable. Maybe it's something in between. And I didn't see anybody working real hard that if USAID had a legitimate goal and all of that stuff was going to get eradicated, what were our inclinations to save the parts that were actually healthy about USAID? I agree that we should need to get rid of USAID, the Department of Education. Any other corrupted organization should be gone and then rebuild it in only the capacities that were intended. So what you do with a poisonous tree is there's more poisonous than not. And you got to get rid of the freaking tree. But at the same time, you got to know that there are people's livelihoods that are connected with that. So I don't know if the incinerated food was intended for U.S. citizens or charity in other countries. Both are a huge waste of something that could have helped somebody for sure. But I don't believe that the government or these NGOs or any of those programs do a real great job of of helping people in the first place. I think they're, like I said, I think they're more poisonous than they are helpful. And so getting out of the business of at least admitting that you're a terrible charity, don't give you any more charities to administer. Let's use that as a, hey, you remember that one time that a government agency incinerated a bunch of the stuff that it could have used to help with people? Are there any other things outside of government that could have done that better that wouldn't have been incinerated that food? Let's go with them. And maybe it's a cautionary tale that helps us decide to do less government and more private. World Food Bank agreed to deliver it. Carter says, one last thing, Joe. The difference between me and the Democrats is they just hate Trump versus I didn't hate Biden. I hated his policies. Yeah, if let's just say Trump did say, all right, guys, I want to tell you I've been working secretly here. Worst Trump impression ever. The worstest Trump impression ever. I actually cured cancer. As much as you hate me, I cured cancer. And if we could just come together and help us cure cancer, come with me, Democrats. Let's cure cancer. And you can picture the caricatures that you know on the Democrat side and what they would say. You would have almost all Republicans think this was the best thing ever, that this was sliced bread and curing cancer, literally curing cancer. And you have the middle people who are like, I hate Trump and I hate that he's going to get credit for something good, but it is curing cancer. I'd be willing to maybe not be vocal. When I hate him, I'm real loud, but during this good thing, I'm going to be kind of quiet and just kind of let it happen. I'm going to wait until I can yell and scream at him again. And then there's going to be the people, no matter what it is, I'm going to find a way to cure cancer and make it an actual evil. And I'm digging right now to find out how he's going to make a bunch of money doing it. He only did it for his ego. It's a corrupt decision, even though cancer be killed, but don't even get excited about cancer being cured. This is bad and you shouldn't support it. And you have those three different groups, right? And you know if you're in it or not. And there just happens to be a whole lot that hate him so bad because of who he is that they will take on even if it's cancer, it's a bad thing. And I don't think that that's just an over dramatic statement. I think there are truly people in those camps. I mean, things that are even non-political. I watch people put through the prism of figuring out a way to make it Trump is bad. And Carter is right. Too many of you that even if you're reasonable, too many on your first impulse is to try to make it bad for Trump in some way or fashion just because you don't like him. And we do this in our personal things. Your neighbor steals from you, right? Are you likely to take an objective stance on your neighbor when anything happens and take their side, give them benefit of the doubt? No, they wronged you. You hate them. So if somebody pays them a compliment, you want to talk somebody out of that compliment so nobody believes that this really bad person is going to be acknowledged for a positive thing. So I think Carter's right that in the future, currently, I think Republicans are more likely to give compliment to a Democrat when they deserve it. And I think it's very unlikely that a Democrat gives a compliment to a Republican when it's worthwhile. So thank you, Carter. Julie says it was intentionally cruel. And Carter says, very good imitation, almost as good as your Russian one. It's the best imitation, but sometimes the worst. Okay, Miss Piggy. Carter, you're a piggy. How do you like being a piggy? All right, it got worse as time went on. But anyway, I'll bring out my terrible impressions whenever I think they're necessary. So thank you, Carter. All right, checking the phones last time. Nobody's online. No more comments. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I appreciate all you being out there. Tomorrow we'll be back. Hopefully Kelin didn't get swine flu, coronavirus for the 19th time, or any kind of measles, mumps, rubella, any of that kind of stuff. And make sure you join us later today at 3:30. I'm going to come back online. And I'm going to talk to an MD, and we're going to talk about the autism and Tylenol connection. And this is not going to be a political pursuit. This is going to be 100% a philosophical pursuit among two people who are reasonable, highly educated, and able to debate without bringing in pettiness to the conversation. So that's not something you won't want to miss. Be back at 3:30 later today. Have a great one, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.